What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of Poker Face Season 1, Episode 9, Escape from Mountain. This episode is once again directed by Rian Johnson. Okay, what an interesting episode, for better or worse, to be fairly honest. This is an episode that actually changed up the status quo of what this series does. It actually went places that I wasn't expecting, and I didn't know as this episode was going along what exactly was going to happen, but I liked this episode. I didn't like the ending of the episode at all. I thought it was really rushed, but it was a fun episode nonetheless. It brings, of course, in Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is a staple of Rian Johnson's films, pretty much in every film he's ever been in, whether it is a major part or not. And it's a episode that actually sees Charlie put in a lot of danger, which is very fascinating. And of course, is the penultimate episode of this season, so there's going to be that eventual kind of crux or conclusion that will lead into the finale of this first season. So, it's an interesting episode. It has its issues, of course. This is an episode that has, people like David Castañeda and, of course, the recently Oscar-nominated Stephanie Hsu. It's like I said, it's a very different episode than what we've gotten. There's no Charlie having a job. This is Charlie basically in survival mode in a lot of respects, but there is still a poker face episode, so she's still able to kind of pieces and parts the situation to kind of figure out what exactly is going on. But basically, it's an episode where we have a character played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt who plays Trey Mendez, and he's an individual that is living in the mountains. We're not really sure why, and I found it interesting because he has all the luxuries of like a really nice place. He has a MetaQuest, which is apparently this series is produced by MetaQuest, because I've seen this like the second time we've seen a MetaQuest 2, which is the VR headset in this series. He has that. He has a really nice TV. He has all the alcohol. You can get Uber Eats or whatever that delivery service is. He just, everything he can imagine he is able to get. He looks like he's a very rich person. And I found that really fascinating because as the episode goes along, we see that he's starting to get bored. And it just shows you that you could have all the wealth in the world, you could have anything, but unless you kind of upend your status quo and kind of do things differently, you'll never be happy. And it also proves that money will never buy you happiness. But there's more to it. We find out that, when he basically upsets the driver, the Uber driver, the delivery service driver, he has to retrieve his food. But in order to do that, he has to step outside the complex that he lives in. And that's when we find out that he is, of course, has the ankle bracelet, and he's in, whatever trouble he's in. So he's confined to his home. He's home confined to stuff like that, house arrest. And basically leads to his ankle bracelet basically turning off. And he's like, he gets a call from his, parolee or whatever, and says he's got to visit him in the morning to find out what happened, blah, 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 blah. But at least, of course, Trey, taking his car, which is the exact car we see in the MetaQuest, which is this nice yellow Lamborghini. And in the process, he's driving down the road. It's in the middle of a snowstorm, whatever. There's a deer. He almost hits the deer, and then he hits somebody. And of course, this is a murder mystery show like Columbo, stuff like that. So there's this character who, of course, is played by David Castañeda, who runs this like lodge at the end of the road. Basically, just Gordon-Levitt's Trey visits him, says, "I have a body. I need to, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And they decide they're going to bury this body in a secluded spot. And in the process of everything, we find out that Trey and this character played by David Castañeda are old friends. There's this missing hitchhiker. There's the whole big thing about like what's going on. The David Castañeda character, that is Jimmy, basically has guilt, about the situation. And they have back and forth. And there's animosity because Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Trey character came back. And so we finally flip over to a situation where somebody knocks on the door, and it ends up being the body that they buried. And of course, we think we see Charlie's vehicle, the Barracuda or whatever it is, pop up, and it leads into that flashback where we find out that, of course, it's really kind of funny where Charlie's character is basically driving through the mountains. She's lost. She finds this like really hot, attractive guy. I think I don't know if it's like really, like there's a couple of points in this episode which I really kind of was confused by. I guess maybe she kind of fell in love, or had that love at first crush or whatever, and finds herself stuck in the mountains for a long time when it snows, and she's just trying to find money to get off this, as she calls it, mountain. And I did bleep that out because I do want to have this not have this monetized and stuff like that. But this is where we meet Stephanie Shu, who's a kleptomaniac. She's an individual that keeps stealing Charlie's wallet, which is it comes into play later. She actually has a stolen credit card, and that's where she becomes known as Morty by Charlie. And it's a really good relationship. I found it very funny. Like I said, Stephanie Shu just got nominated for an Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's really cool that Rian Johnson's been able to work with her, as of course Hong Chow, which I thought was kind of neat. But basically, Stephanie Shu's Morty character, they go on a road trip. They decide to go travel down the road. And unfortunately, the deer, which becomes into the factor of the series, because in this episode where they almost hit the deer and they crash into the snow area. Basically, what ends up happening is the character that is Morty decides she's going to go off and try and find help. We think that she's going to be the one that gets hit, but she doesn't come back. So therefore, the character Charlie gets out of the car, sees the deer, and we see her perspective of actually Charlie got hit, which is kind of interesting. And she wakes up in the middle of this ditch area where she of course is under a lot of pain because she got hit by a car. Therefore, she's broken leg, everything. She escapes with this like little, what she thinks is like her pick piece or whatever, her knife of some sort. And it leads into basically she's the one that knocked on the door. She's the one that was the one that got hit. You think it was the Stephanie Shu character, but no, it was Charlie. And the one in the Barracuda is actually the Stephanie Shu Morty character. She eventually came back. And it's like all this stuff that was happening is actually interesting. I was like, this is a really good episode. This is just really fun. It leads into basically the two individuals, the David Castañeda character, Joseph Gordon-Levitt character, basically trying to figure out how to circumvent the situation. And I really kind of like the idea of like just how despicable Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in this episode. How he's just like trying to figure out a way to like either get him paid off. David Castañeda's character has under a lot of stress because of the situation. It leads to Charlie just kind of like trying to figure out like who is doing what is happening here. Stephanie Shu is an individual. I don't think it's the good end of the stick when it comes to storytelling aspect and character development, because she is able to figure out what's happening, and she is killed by Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Trey character and thrown with the Lamborghini car off the side of the mountain and dies in a very horrible accident. And it does play out later on in the episode, which I thought, was an interesting kind of a fake out moment, but didn't play out very well. Charlie, of course, talks to David Castañeda's Jimmy character, and Jimmy kind of reveals that this character that is kind of the crux of this episode, I think her name was Cherry or something like that. She was a hiker that went missing, and that the object that Charlie had was actually, I think it was like a femur bone or something like that of this character, because there were pins in the bone, which means it was like an accident. So they kind of figured out that it was that hiker, that character was missing, but the one that was missing was actually friends of Jimmy and Trey. And we find out that Trey is kind of a murderer, that he killed her. And Jimmy confronts him and gets shot in the head by Trey. And Trey, of course, gets stabbed with the knife that Jimmy had. And of course, Jimmy stabs Charlie in the chest, which we think Charlie's dead. But Charlie has to last the whole season, so we know that's not going to happen. She's reburied with Jimmy in the little ravine thing, and Trey is able to. There's a moment at the beginning, like middle of this episode, where Charlie is played off like she's getting drugged by Jimmy, but ends up getting the drug by, of course, Trey ends up getting drugged with those pills that she spits out. And he makes his way back to, of course, his house, where therefore he thinks he's gotten away with it and stuff like that. And then he realizes earlier that Stephanie Shu's like, you left your tracks everywhere, so they're gonna figure out what you did and when you did it and all that stuff. And when his parolee officer comes in, he realizes when he looks at his shoe, he's like, crap, that means he, of course, is going to be found out that, they have his footprints, so therefore they're going to be able to figure out that not only did he leave, but he committed the murders, because they're going to find his footprints everywhere and they're going to find the blood everywhere. It's an interesting way to end his character, but you don't find out till later on when, of course, Charlie, which it's never fully explained. I guess it kind of is, but there's a newscast or a news report where the news reporter is talking about how the body of Jimmy and a body of Charlie were found. How they were found, I don't know. I guess the watch, maybe somebody found them in the woods or something like that. It's not really fully explained. It's kind of what my major problems with this episode are, where you get points where Charlie is saved. She lives, of course, because you see her breathing. She's in traction at the Denver hospital, and I just, this is where my problems lie, where I feel like the episode kind of, it needed more time to finish out the episode. I think it moved too quickly near the end. I think it had a great little, halfway through the episode, it was really great. It was really paced very well, but then I think I felt like maybe Rian Johnson just kind of put himself in the corner where he didn't have enough time to finish out the story, so therefore he had to relegate his last portion of this episode to a news report. And I wish, I love Rian Johnson, but I think it's a struggle sometimes with, how do you pace out a thing, and sometimes his stories and stuff like that don't pace very well. When it comes to his writing, I don't think that's a detriment always to him, but I think it can be a problematic thing. It is what it is, unfortunately, when you only have 40 to 50 minutes to tell an episode. But I think if it were paced a little bit longer, I think if it had been an hour and 5 minutes or something like that, I think it could have worked. But she realizes that her name, the Charlie character, was actually the Morty character, so therefore she is played off as Jane Doe. She thinks she's saved, and of course the character that's played by Benjamin Bratt, who has been following her, trying to find her because the whole situation in the first episode, because she's on the news and blah blah blah. That's another point where where did Cliff? I guess Cliff knew where she was going to be at the hospital. I guess it just kind of, it's just the whole idea of how Cliff knows she was at the hospital. I guess from the report, I don't know. It's really, really weird how Cliff knows where she is. I guess I don't know. I think this is another problem with the storytelling, where Cliff's been gone for so long in this series that it almost feels like when he comes back, it's oh yeah, I completely forgot about him. And this feels like a cheat, to be fairly honest, where they kind of need to bring him back just at the right moment of the penultimate episode to kind of play out the last portion, where we eventually see how this season's arc plays out. Yeah, it leads into basically him telling Sterling Senior, who we'll find out who that is. He's like, well, how big of a grave do you want me to bury her in, and stuff like that. But it's just that's where my problems lie with this episode. It's a really interesting story. It's a really different story from what we're used to seeing in this series, where she doesn't have a job. She becomes friends with somebody that doesn't really it's not fully fleshed out, but it's a fun little story. It's ideas with the character of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, how despicable he is. He lies about his place in his job and how much he is a criminal, stuff like that. So he's lying about how he's innocent, but he's really guilty. It's you have an ankle bracelet, you're obviously telling lies and stuff like that. And it plays into the missing hiker that they were best friends with and stuff like that. And it just, overall, it's really fascinating episode, really interesting episode. I just think it needed more time. That's just how it works out. So I like it. I still think it's a really enjoyable episode. But I think last week's episode, the one with Cherry Jones and Nick Nolte, was way, way better, to be fairly honest. And I think this is still an enjoyable episode. It needed more. That's all. So with that said, where I will rank this episode is we'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. I mean, there's enough there to at least be a really enjoyable episode for what it is. So with that said, that is going to be my take on this episode, which is season 1, episode 9 of Poker Face. It's called Escape from Mountain. An episode that once again is good. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, thank you so much for watching. Comments below, what did you think of the episode yourself? What did you think of the overall structure? Did you like this? Then the simple fact that it was different, all that good stuff. If you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button and join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.